For the first time in Asia, connect your landphone and smartphone through SLT Wi-Fi with the SLT Voice app.
Tonight, out of the ashes, the Kochikade shrine officially reopens following the barbaric Easter Sunday attacks. Hezbollah in crosshairs. Ex-governor accused of Arabization in Kathankudi.
Hezbollah.
It has taken place during his time.
Through the eyes of the EU. European Union urges mutual respect and tolerance for Muslims in Sri Lanka. Accuses media of prejudice. Neighbours attraction. Sri Lanka targets an India-centric tourism strategy, with nightlife being the lure.
Our casinos are no doubt an attraction. I have been telling the Hoteliers Association that they should start their nightclubs. I don't know why they are not doing it.
All that and much more coming up on First at 9 this Wednesday, the 12th of June 2019.
මුහුණ සති කීපයකට කලින් Fair and Lovely men ගෑවට පස්සේ මාක්ස් අඩු වෙලා ෆෙයානස් වැඩි වෙලා.
මාක්ස් අඩු කරලා ඔයාගේ ෆෙයානස් ස්ටෑන්ඩඩ් එක වැඩි කරගන්න. Fair and Lovely men anti-marks cream.
From AdaDerana, this is AdaDerana First at 9. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
Good evening and welcome to First at 9. I'm Dhammika Kanaka. Let's start with your local stories. St. Anthony's Shrine in Kochikade was one of the main targets of the Easter Sunday suicide bombers on the 21st of April. Dozens died at the location and there are many who are still being treated at hospitals. Today, after completion of its renovation work, the shrine was officially reconsecrated and open for public ahead of the annual feast, which will be held tomorrow in memory of those who lost their lives.
The St. Anthony's Church in Kochikade, which was one of the main targets in the Easter Sunday attacks, reopened today following a mass conducted by Archbishop of Colombo, His Eminence Malcolm Cardinal Ranjit. Those who were injured during the bombings as well as relatives of those who died gathered for today's mass.
පියාදර සහෝදර සහෝදරියනි මෙම දෙව් මැදුර ආශිර්වාද ගැන්වීමේ උතුම් මෙහෙය සඳහා ඊයේ කටුවපිටිය දේවස්ථානයේ
Suresh Fernando, who was a victim of the St. Sebastian's church attack in Katuapitia, succumbed to his injuries yesterday. People are still dying because of this attack. These suicide bombers wouldn't go to heaven and instead they will go directly to the depths of hell. In front of every politician gathered here, I'm saying that people want a country with a genuine political leadership and politicians with backbones who wouldn't protect wrongdoers and who will bring the responsible to justice. They want a just country. Many are living in a state of confusion in the nation. They are doubtful whether the country will recover. We pray to God that political leaders will be able to achieve these goals and serve the country. Today we need leaders who love the country more than themselves. We pray to God that we be given such leaders for this nation.
අපි විශේෂාකාරයෙන් අද යාඥා කරනවා දෙවියන් වහන්සේට කන්න ලව් කරනවා.
In the meantime, annual feast of the St. Anthony's Church is scheduled to be held tomorrow under the patronage of the Archbishop of Colombo. The church, however, has decided to hold this year's feast in memory of those who died during the Easter Sunday attacks, and therefore celebrations will be held without much festivity. This year, several important traditions such as the annual processions parading the statue of St. Anthony will not be followed.
Now, representative of the Federation of Kathankudi Mosques and Muslim Institutions, Abu Salih Uwais, reveals that Arabization was started and fostered in Kathankudi during the tenure of former Eastern Province Governor MLAM Hezbollah. Giving his testimony before the Parliamentary Select Committee probing the Easter Sunday attacks, Uwais also emphasized that Arabization was not a cultural value embedded in the local Muslim community and that it was a concept started in Saudi Arabia to expel other nationals from the country.
Zahran Qasim was hailing from a poor background. He has completed only up to grade 5. He was enrolled as a student at the Jamiatul Falah Arabic College, Kathankudi. But owing to his bad character, he was expelled by the Board of Administration in 2005. Honorable members, gradually he started his incendious speech from 2006. Following that, he also propagated Muslim students should not stand up or respect the national anthem. So there was also controversy. Zahran went to Japan. He returned and started his activities at the same organization. But there was a dispute arose between him and the organization, and he was expelled from the Darul. After that only he started a national Tawheed Jamaat. In 2017, March 10, Zahran started a campaign against the different ideological people. Zahran's followers used knife, clubs, swords. Zahran was not arrested.
Katankudi, you have certain roads that have Arabic wording.
Without learning Arabic, Quran cannot be...
In Sri Lanka has two official languages.
Yes.
So when you have two official languages, the link language,
it does need to. Why should be? Why should be? You learn Arabic to understand Quran and other prophetic tradition. You should not display on the road and make it Arabized. I have seen the main road which is decorated, embellished with palm trees.
Yeah.
And there is a board, and I don't.
You said about Arabization of Katankudi. It has been going on for some time.
Yeah.
How did it happen? Who started it?
Honorable member, the parliamentary representative Katankudi, Mr. Such and such.
Who? Mr.
Hizbullah. And it has taken place during his time. They planted the palm trees.
Would you say that Mr. Hizbullah was the prime mover?
I don't know whether he is a prime mover. Because he has been in politics for about 25 years or 30 years. This has taken place during his 10 years.
Now, the number of complaints against former Minister Rishad Badiuddin as well as former governors MLA Hizbullah and Azad Saleh lodged with the special committee set up at the police headquarters to record grievances against the trio stood at 21 by 3 p.m. today. Police spokesperson SP Ruwan Gunasekara said that the window given to file complaints against them is now closed. 11 of the complaints were filed against former Minister Badiuddin, 5 were lodged against former Governor of the Western Province Azad Saleh, and 2 complaints against former Eastern Province Governor MLA Hizbullah. Minister of Megapolis and Western Development Partili Champika Ranamaka accuses the President of deliberately keeping the state idle by not convening the government, or cabinet rather, in violation of the Constitution. Speaking at a media briefing today, the Minister also pointed out that there are over 100 cabinet papers languishing awaiting cabinet deliberation. Through his actions, the President is deliberately keeping the state idle. There are 104 cabinet papers languishing without being taken up for deliberation. By not convening the cabinet, the President is misusing his powers and it is against the Constitution. We know that there are people who are scolding the Speaker because of the Parliamentary Select Committee. The Speaker does not have the discretionary power to not appoint a Parliamentary Select Committee when there is a request made for it by parliamentarians.
Cabinet ලබන සුමාරේ රැස් වෙනවා. ඉතල බලන්න. ඒ ප්‍රශ්නයක් නැහැ. ජනාධිපතිතුමා ලෑස්තිද? අපි ලෑස්ති.
In the meantime, the National Investigation Agency of India today raided 8 locations in Tamil Nadu's Coimbatore over a suspected link between an Islamic State module in the region and the Sri Lanka Easter bombers. A 2-member NIA team was dispatched to Colombo last month to coordinate with Sri Lankan authorities in the investigation into the attacks. A top NIA official has, however, said that the visit is not to assist Sri Lanka with the country's probe, but to see if an exchange of information and evidence gathered by India and Sri Lanka can be mutually beneficial. Quoting sources, News 18 says that the NIA will also share evidence found in the ISIS Kerala and Coimbatore module cases with Sri Lankan investigators. It said that 21 people from Kerala, including women and children, had moved to Afghanistan to join the ISIS, and members of this group, led by a person identified as Ashfaq Majid, had come to Jaffna before sneaking into Afghanistan. The delegation of the European Union to Sri Lanka says political and religious pressure is being directed at Sri Lanka's Muslim community, which they say is undermining peace and reconciliation in the country. Earlier today, European ambassadors called on Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe to discuss concerns of the EU member states on various issues that emerged following attacks in Sri Lanka. The Government Information Department said the diplomats appreciated the PM's announcement of establishing an interfaith council of religious reconciliation in the island.
Resident ambassadors of European countries in Sri Lanka called on Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe at Temple Trees this morning to raise concerns over various issues that emerged in the aftermath of the Easter attacks. The envoys had pointed out the need for a monitoring mechanism which also involves the civil society on hate speech. Premier Wickremesinghe had in turn appraised the diplomats that legislations will be brought to criminalise hate speech by amending the Penal Code and Criminal Procedure Code. He had also briefed the EU member states of a decision to set up Interfaith Council of Religious Reconciliation in Sri Lanka. Later this evening, in a joint statement, the delegation of the European Union said that they were deeply concerned by political and religious pressure being directed at Sri Lanka's Muslim community, undermining peace and reconciliation in the country. The statement went on to say that prejudiced and unsubstantiated allegations repeatedly published by media serve only to fuel intolerance. The EU also pledged to stand by all Sri Lankans working to preserve the peaceful coexistence between communities, while urging religious and other community leaders to support and speak out against violence. The EU also urges the President, Prime Minister and all political leaders to reassert Sri Lanka's commitment to mutual respect, tolerance and equal treatment under the law, irrespective of faith or ethnicity.
Meanwhile, Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe left for Singapore this afternoon on a 3-day official visit. The Prime Minister's office said that he is set to meet several ministers in Singapore before returning to Sri Lanka on Friday. Now, in the meantime, Opposition Leader Mahinda Rajapaksa emphasises that it is the responsibility of the President and the Prime Minister to hold the Cabinet meeting. The Cabinet meeting was not convened yesterday amid speculation that the President threatened to boycott the Cabinet if the Parliamentary Select Committee probing these attacks continue to function. Following an event in Colombo yesterday, the Opposition Leader added that the resignation of Muslim ministers from their ministerial positions was the wrong move. I can't say anything about it because it is up to the President and the Prime Minister. All I can say is that the country clearly is heading for its downfall. This must be the first time in the global history that a President and the Prime Minister don't see eye to eye. They won't be affected by it, but it's the country that will be affected by all of it. There is a way to do it, and they have made a media circus out of it. It's a dangerous thing to reveal who intelligence officials are. Once they made a list called the Millennium City. Everyone on it, except for one person, died by the hands of the LTTE. The one who survived did so by leaving the country. Terrorists don't belong to any religion or community, and that's why they retaliate when such information is revealed. The Select Committee was appointed before a court case into the matter was filed. But even the Parliament isn't allowed to talk about matters related to an ongoing case. I said it to their face that it was the wrong thing to do. Not just myself, but chief prelates of the Buddhist sects also made it clear to them. But then we should not let racism be inculcated. Tangible measures to collaborate with UN mechanisms in keeping with international norms and practices took centre stage at discussions during the recent visit to Sri Lanka by UN Assistant Secretary General and Executive Director of the Counter-Terrorism Executive Directorate, Michelle Connix, in Colombo recently. During her visit, Connix held discussions with the President, the Prime Minister, political and civil society leaders, focusing on terrorist financing and asset freezing, dealing with foreign terrorist fighters, as well as counter-terrorism legislation, countering radicalization and violent extremism, effective border management against terrorist travel, and the threat posed by internet and social media in spreading radical ideology and violent extremism were also touched upon. According to the Ministry of Foreign Foreign Affairs, following dialogue with CONIX held at the Ministry of Defence, the need for a whole-of-government approach to counter-terrorism and violent extremism was emphasised. The Assistant Secretary-General's visit also explored further measures that need to be taken for Sri Lanka to be compliant with international counter-terrorism obligations under relevant Security Council resolutions. Now, the Janata Vimukti Peramuna today staged a protest demonstration in front of the Fort Railway Station demanding the government's immediate resignation. They charged that the present rulers have betrayed the country by disregarding the security of the general public. They also accused the President and the Prime Minister of playing the blame game, while making it clear that their demand for the present government's end is not geared to bring the Rajapakshas back to power. The JVP went on to accuse the government of letting the United States and India dictate the country's political decisions. We've got more news coming up on the other side of this break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. You're watching First at 9. Now, child labour has been a rumbling global issue for quite some time, essentially robbing children of their childhood. It inhibits their potential while stripping away their dignity, which in turn impacts negatively on physical and mental development of children exploited in the crude practice. Yet the major contributory factors leading to child labour are not nuances, but well-known elements such as poverty, parental illiteracy and socio-economic circumstances. This year's International Day Against Child Labour falls today, and it is marked under the theme "Children shouldn't work in fields but on dreams." First at 9 took a look at what it all means for Sri Lanka.
The International Labour Organization launched the World Day Against Child Labour in 2002 to focus attention on the global extent of child labour and the action and efforts needed to eliminate it. Each year on the 12th of June, governments, employers and workers' organizations, civil society as well as millions of people from around the world are brought together to highlight the plight of child labour and the measures that can be taken to help them. Yet at present, 152 million children are still used in labour across the globe. Although child labour is prevalent in almost every sector, the agri-sector seems to be where the brutal practice is at its worst. It is found that 7 out of every 10 child labour cases are identified to be in agriculture sector.
It takes to all come together to be aware what is child labor, what is illegal, and what are the ways of dealing with it to provide alternatives for those children. It's extremely complex, and it takes a host of actors to come together to try to eliminate it. We've made a huge amount of progress over the last 2 decades in reducing child labor in hundreds of millions, but the last haul is the hardest to reach, and it's going to take a concerted effort ranging from education, health, social protection, poverty elimination, and a real amount of commitment and awareness to make this a reality, its total elimination.
Are people open to opposing and complaining about such activities?
You can only complain if you really know what you're looking to complain about. And that's where the understanding is so important, to see what is child labor and what's not. In fact, you don't get that many complaints because they think it's normal. A lot of people believe that this is part of growing up, when the whole family, for example, might be in debt bondage, taken out a loan, have to make ends meet, where children are handling pesticides, children working, for example, in tobacco, things that you know that are absolutely a no-no. That is where it gets very difficult and needs to be dealt with urgently.
Sri Lanka has made substantial improvements in the area of child labour in recent decades and has observed a drastic decline in the population of working children.
We have done it, I think, over about 3-4 decades now. We've had very good social development policies in place in the country. We give free education, and then you have nutrition programs, health programs, we have free health care. So all of them together has already allowed us to reach the 1% child labour situation in the country now.
The country director for the ILO Sri Lanka also elaborated on the global involvement and how Sri Lanka stands a role model in a journey towards eradicating child labour.
Right now there's something called Alliance 8.7, which is linked to the Sustainable Development Goals target of eliminating child labour by 2025. This alliance of over 200 organizations that have the know-how, that have been working on eliminating child labour, this is a conglomeration of them coming together to support each other to find a way to end child labour. Sri Lanka has announced itself to be a pathfinder country on Alliance 8.7, so it also plans to show the way to the rest of the world as to how it intends to eliminate child labour.
Children should indeed work on dreams and not in fields. As the former South African president, the late Nelson Mandela once said, there can be no keener revelation of a society's soul than the way in which it treats its children.
5 persons, including 3 preschool children, were injured in Pahamune of Naramala today after a branch of a boh tree fell on the group. The incident occurred when a group of 13 preschool children were participating in a Buddhist religious program this morning. The injured are currently receiving treatment at the Kurunegala Teaching Hospital. One of the students, who is a 3-year-old, is in critical condition and is receiving treatment at the intensive care unit at the hospital. Now, with the global tourism industry predicting India to have 50 million outward-bound tourists by 2020, Sri Lanka is targeting the neighbours as a strategic market in the island nation's attempts to revive the third-largest foreign exchange earner. Arrivals to Sri Lanka plunged to a low of 1,300 daily average in May, but the tourism promotions chief said average tourist arrivals are expected to increase significantly to a daily average of 2,000. Despite a blow to the industry following attacks, Sri Lanka tourism also expects to end the year just 20% below last year's arrivals of 2,333,796.
Sri Lanka Tourism Promotion Bureau, together with the Sri Lanka Association of Inbound Tour Operators and the Hotels Association of Sri Lanka, launched a new promotional campaign for Indian tourists in Colombo.
In 2018, we had 424,000 Indians visiting Sri Lanka. Indian outbound numbers are growing at a rate of 7% from 2006 to 2016, whereas the global growth of tourism has been 4.5%. Indians have done 21.9 million trips in 2018, and per visit per tourist has spent $876. So that's a significant amount of money. We have a perception that Indian market is not lucrative. It all depends on how you play your strategies in the Indian market.
The promotional tourism package for Indian tourists will consist of 3 categories starting at $108 per person in order to increase the volume of Indian tourists to Sri Lanka.
Now this Indian package is very important. If they keep travelling to Sri Lanka, that is enough. We do not depend on anyone else. As to how we could attract them is something that we have to work on. This is the first package. We intend to have this drawn to China and some other countries as well, some other Middle East countries as well. Our casinos are no doubt an attraction for many of the Indians. The complaint that I get from the Indian authorities is there isn't enough entertainment in the city of Colombo and outstation. I have been telling the Hoteliers Association that they should start their nightclubs. I don't know why they are not doing it. This is one way of attracting the younger Indian tourists to come into Sri Lanka.
Now to bring you a brief market update, shares rose for a 4th straight session today, with the all-share price index ending 0.18% firmer at 5,378.73, its highest close since the 7th of May. Turnover was 254.8 million rupees, while foreign investors sold a net 26.8 million rupees worth of shares. We now have Dimantha Matthew with a brief report.
The bond market remained broadly flat with low volumes as investors await tomorrow's bond auction to attain a direction for the market. Bill auction saw the 1 year getting rejected, while 3 months and 6 months were accepted at similar levels as last week. In the equity market, we saw strong buying interest today with renewed retail activity after a long lapse. Uptrend was on low turnover today with one crossing in Ceylon cold stores. The rest of the turnover was spread out with retailers getting activated.
And now for a currency update, the Sri Lankan rupee ended week at 178 rupees and 32 cents against the US dollar today. Now let's take a look at how the Sri Lankan rupee traded against other major currencies during the day. We're going to move in for a very short break, but when we come back, we take a look at international news. Stay tuned. Welcome back. You're watching First at 9. Now, police have fired rubber bullets and tear gas at protesters in Hong Kong, where anger at a new extradition bill has spilled over into violence. Protesters blocked key roads around government buildings and threw bricks and projectiles at police. The government is still backing the bill, which would allow extradition to mainland China, and it is expected to pass the final vote on the 20th of June. But the Legislative Council has now delayed its second reading. The Legislative Council said in a statement that today's scheduled meeting was cancelled and it was unclear when the second reading would take place. 22 people have been injured so far in clashes, but none are said to be critical. Protests had been largely peaceful, as thousands of people took to the streets and attempted to block access to government buildings ahead of the scheduled debate of the bill. But today the demonstrations escalated with tear gas, rubber bullets and beanbag rounds being fired by police as activists tried to storm government buildings. Sri Lanka Cricket denies allegations circulating in social media which say that Sri Lanka Cricket will be bankrupt in 9 months. President of Sri Lanka Cricket, Shammi Silva, says that there are no financial issues in the organisation. He added that him and his committee have ensured complete transparency and financial accountability in all SLC's decisions over the past 3.5 months. And although the financial picture was not as good as it should have been when they took over in February this year, they streamlined and prioritised development and other expenses. Silva went on to dismiss the report as attempts of interested parties to destabilise the administration and demotivate the Sri Lankan team. Meanwhile, SLC's honorary treasurer Lasantha Wickramasinghe conceded that there had been a drop in income when compared to last year, but he too rejected the suggestion of SLC's looming bankruptcy. And that's it from all of us here at First at 9. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.